Hi, friends. Good morning. Hope all of you are doing really good. First of all, I would love to welcome all of you to Gurbani Institute. So, my name is Kavarpreet, and I have been handling uh, two subjects at CA final level. One is the strategic financial management from Group 1, and second is the direct tax from Group 2. Okay, that is paper number 2 and paper number 7. These are two subjects which I'm handling as of now, and I've been teaching for close to 10 years now. That is a decade almost, and I have taught more than 15,000 students across India. So this is the new batch starting for direct tax, and the first class which I'm taking right now, it relates to basically giving you an understanding about how the curriculum will be done over a span of these 45 to 50 classes. Plus, I will also give you a basic introduction to the tax structure in India, how the tax structure is, how it is formulated, where are the powers given to frame the tax laws, and all those things. The basic things we will discuss today. Okay, so a lot of your understanding that you have got at IPC level, that will still be useful at final level, but what makes tax one of the most challenging papers out of these 8 papers is number one, the fact that it is very, very voluminous. Okay, and the second thing is that at IPC level, what you're expected is to know the law, okay, know the direct tax and indirect tax laws. But at final level, things are different. You need to go in depth into it, and you are expected to know how to applicate your knowledge. Okay, it won't be like a section is given to you and you are supposed to explain the provisions. It will be a little more challenging over here at CF final level. You will be given case studies kind of situations, and you will have to apply your knowledge rather than just having a basic understanding. Okay, and that is where my role comes into the picture. So that is my job. I have to teach you the content right from the bare act as much as possible. We have tried using the bare act in our material. Then I will decode it in my language to make it easy for you to understand. Okay, and then we have lots of illustrations, lots of examples to get a better understanding with the help of numerical examples. Okay, so uh, the subject is voluminous. What is the basic reason for that? So if you see, what we are studying is the Income Tax Act 1961. What you're studying is the Income Tax Act 1961, which means the act which you're studying right now is almost 60 years old. Okay, let me give you some factual data. The data might vary a little bit here and there, but it will be able to convey you the gravity of what I am discussing. In the last 60 odd years, we had close to 85,000 judgments being given on any disputes whatsoever has arisen in comprehending the bare act. Okay, so the language is very, very lucid in the bare act from the expert's perspective. But when you are implementing that knowledge at your level, okay, at the corporate level, at individuals level, at any category of person, disputes are arising because of how you interpret the law and how you implement it. And because of that, we had so many judgments coming in. Once the judgment comes in, it might happen that a particular judgment goes against the assessing officer or against the tax authorities, and then they figure out that okay, some loopholes are there which have to be plugged in. Loopholes, again, you need to be very smart. Framing of the Income Tax Act requires a particular level of knowledge and expertise. Figuring out the loopholes require a different level of expertise, okay, and you know who are capable of doing that, okay. I don't want to go into all that. So there are people who are very smart to read the act and find out the loopholes and exploit it for the only purpose is to save your taxes. Now saving taxes is a little lenient word to use. It would be better to call it evading taxes, right? So every time a loophole is figured out after a judgment is given, then again they will bring an amendment into it. Every time an amendment comes, every year some amendments will be there based on the past loopholes or wherever they felt that the particular language in the bare act is creating a confusion, then they will introduce some kind of amendments with every year. So you know this, right? Every year a finance bill will be presented in the budget, which budget happens in the month of February, right? And then based on that bill, the acceptance has to be given in the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. I will explain all this to you. And then after that, the president has to give it his acceptance to it. And based on that, the new Finance Act will get created. And this happens every year, right? So if I can tell you this, close to 7,000 amendments have come in the last 60 odd years. 7,000 amendments have come. So you can understand it's almost like more than 100 amendments every year that is happening, right? And this is again based on, as I told you, based on some loopholes or based on some new kind of a business coming in for which taxability has not yet been defined. So for that, a new set of laws have to be created. Like that, more than 7,000 amendments have come. This is what makes the subject a Herculean task. So one thing is very clear. If you plan to study the subject only for the sake of passing the exam, I always tell this, the first blunder you can do at CA final level is to study a subject only for passing the exam. Nothing can be studied only at surface level. Nothing. At CA final level, you pick up from FR, go up till IDT, all 8 papers, left, right, upside, downside, everything you need to know inside out. Otherwise, making application of the subject in examination will become very, very difficult for you. And I'm telling you again and again, at CA final level, it is the application of your knowledge which is tested, not your knowledge. So you need to have the expert knowledge in the subject. Okay. Okay. So we have understood what makes the subject complicated. If you see 2016, they have implemented GST for the very first time. 2000, if I'm not wrong, 2016. No, 2017, they proposed that they will introduce the direct tax code, which will replace the existing Income Tax Act 1961. They proposed that they will form a task force. A team was to be set up with 6 members in it, in which they wanted to have this team of experts who will frame the the direct tax code. And this was supposed to be done by mid of 2018. It got delayed. After that, they were given Arun Jaitley, the then finance minister. He gave them the extension. He said, it's okay, you take your time. There were members from CBDT. There were chartered accountants like Girish Ahuja sir was there as part of this team. Ashwin Ranjan, I think, is the member from CBDT, who is also a high-profile person. He was also part of this committee, and they were supposed to bring in this DTC. Okay, now this DTC, the whole idea of the whole objective of this DTC was to make the tax laws, especially the direct tax laws, simplified and easy to implement. Okay, because as I told you, the Income Tax Act now is 60 years old, the one which we are following as of now, and the whole idea was to simplify it. It could not be done in 2018. Now, finally, in 2019, they have been able to complete it. But if I'm not wrong, few days back, the current finance minister, that is Nirmala Sitharaman, she has told for the time being, there are no plans as such to implement DTC. Which means for last 2 years, we have spent a lot of money on the research, on this task force, everything. And after that, once the DTC, a kind of a structure has been planned. It's not completely a refined structure, but some planning has been done about how DTC is going to be. But now, for the time being, they have said that we are not in a state to implement direct tax code. Okay, Let's not go into why they are not implementing it for the time being. But right now, they are not planning to bring it in. So you might look at it as a good news for you, or you might look at it as a unfortunate situation, because if DTC comes in, yes, there will be a revamp of the entire subject. But I feel for once it will make the subject less complicated. Like, if today you ask me between DT and IDT which one is more scoring, I would say that for me IDT looks more scoring, because you don't have to study excise, you don't have to study VAT, you don't have to study sales tax laws. You only are studying one unified tax structure, which is the GST, right? So GST was introduced in 2016. Moreover, like the way you study so many case studies in direct tax, you don't have that many case studies in indirect tax, because obviously because it's a new tax law implemented. There are less disputes. If there are less disputes, the matter does not reach the court of law, and accordingly there are no cases, ongoing cases. Yeah, over a period of 2, 3, 4 years, we will again have accumulation of lots of cases based on the disputes that are arising. Already there are lots of disputes in interpretation of the GST laws also, and there are lots of, because it is being implemented recently in the last couple of years. So even authorities figure out that, yeah, some places loopholes are there, so they will try to plug in those loopholes, and they are making reforms on a regular basis. Okay, so even let's hope that DTC will get implemented, maybe not immediately, but over a period of couple of years, it will get implemented. Okay, so the whole idea is to give you a basic understanding about how tax structure works in India. Okay, so the first thing we need to understand is, so as you know, right now the ruling party is BJP, right? BJP is the ruling party. As I told you, every year the budget will be presented somewhere in the month of February. Generally, it used to be presented on the last working day of February, but for last couple of years, that is 2018 and 2019, the budget has been presented on the first day of February. Okay, so first there will be a draft of the Finance Act, which will be presented to the industry experts. Based on that, then they will prepare the finance bill, which will be presented in the budget. Okay, and then after that, this finance bill will pass through the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, that is the lower house of parliament and the upper house of parliament, and then finally the bill will become the act. Okay, so last year we had Finance Act 2018, which was applicable for previous year 18-19, assessment year 19-20. For you, Finance Act 2019 is applicable for students writing their exams in May 2020 or November 2020. Finance Act 2019 will be applicable, and this will be for previous year 1920, and assessment year will be 2020-21. I hope you got my point. Okay, Finance Act 2019, previous year is 1920, and assessment year is 2021. Was there anything unique about this Finance Act 2019? Yes, this was the year of election, and in the year of election, there will be two budgets presentation, one before the elections and one after the election results are declared. So one was presented on 1st of February. Obviously, this one is more like an interim budget. In the year of election, two budgets will happen, one before the elections and one after the election results. So the first was an interim budget. In that, the ruling government will be very conservative. They won't try to bring in drastic changes, because they have the fear of losing the elections because of that. This government, which is the BJP government, in last 5 years already did certain bold implementations like demonetization, like GST, and Finance Act 2018 already made a couple of drastic changes in the existing tax laws. The biggest one was implementation of Section 112A, which replaced the existing Section 1038. I'll speak about all this, don't worry. 1038 was basically that any long-term capital gains from dealing in equity shares, okay, through a recognized stock exchange will be non-taxable. It will be an exempted income under Section 1038. Last year, they have done away with it. and they implemented Section 112A. For this, again, a lot of protest was done. A lot of investors, both DII, that is domestic institutional investors, and FII, that is foreign institutional investors, did not take it in a right spirit. And a lot of selling pressure was seen in the equity markets. Now, because I teach SFM also, and you already know about this, that I love interlinking the subjects, so I might introduce a lot of impact of direct tax provisions on the Indian equity markets or Indian economy as a whole. Okay, I might do that. Please don't get irritated. It's only for your benefit. Okay, so last year this was already done. With GST, there are mixed opinions. Some set of stakeholders are happy with GST. Some are finding it very, very challenging. Some are finding it very, very at micro level. People are finding it very difficult. It's too much complicated because of the compliances on monthly or quarterly basis. So people are not very happy about it, and some are finding it to be good, as we have now a unified tax in India as far as indirect taxation is concerned. Okay, so the thing is, the first thing we need to understand is the ruling government having the powers to introduce any new tax laws? The answer is no. You cannot introduce any tax laws just because you are a ruling government. Even if you get the votes in favor, the 3/4 of the votes in favor, a new tax law cannot be introduced by the government at its own will or at its own power. That power has not been given for obvious reasons. Otherwise, the moment anybody comes into the as a ruling party, they can do anything, whatever they like. So the powers to introduce a new set of tax laws is given in the Constitution of India. Okay, in the Constitution, Article 265. Okay, there is an article, Article 265 of the Constitution of India, has made it very clear that any new tax law, if has to be introduced, it should be the powers should come through the Constitution, which means first the Constitution of India has to be amended, and only then the tax laws can be introduced. Okay, so this Constitution was framed in the year 1949. And in the year 1950, that is on 26th of January 1950, it was made applicable for the very first time. Okay. Now, how this constitution thing works is that there are entries in the constitution. Okay. Okay. There are entries in the constitution. There are entries number 1 to 96. Okay. If I remember it correctly, entries number 1 to 81 are for non-revenue matters. Okay, when I say non-revenue matters, what does that mean? That means anything which does not directly result in tax revenue for the government, like Companies Act. That is also one of the act, right? That is tax laws are there, but that is not directly resulting in the revenue generation for the tax authorities. Yes, Companies Act have defined certain compliances and regulations which, if not followed by the corporates, will result in some penalties, some fines, which will ultimately become part of the revenue of the government. But the direct intention is not to generate revenue from it, right? Those are considered as non-revenue matters, like Payment of Bonus Act, Payment of Gratuity, Sales of Goods Act. All these are non-revenue matters. So entry number 1 to 81 basically relates to non-revenue matters. When income tax was introduced, it was through entry number 82 that the income tax was introduced, that every person on his or her income has to pay tax, right? That was done through entry number 82. Then entry number 83 was for customs, and similarly entry number 84 was for excise. Similarly, when in 2016-17 GST was introduced, at that point of time also, first the constitution was amended, and after that only the GST Act was introduced. Okay, I hope you're understanding. So the ruling government does not directly have the power to introduce any new tax laws at its own will, first they will have to make amendment in the constitution, and only after that a new text law can be introduced. So first they will frame the text law, then they will present it as a in the industry, take some suggestions from the industry experts. Okay, even CA Institute is invited for giving their suggestions. After that, they will have to pass it through the Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, and then President has to give an acceptance to it. Then that is how the text laws will be implemented. But it has to start from the Constitution. Okay. Now, when the Constitution was framed in 1949, obviously they knew that going forward, maybe 10, 20, 30 years down the line, some new text laws will be introduced. So what they did, they had a residual entry, that is entry number 97. And now if any new text has to be implemented, then it has to be done through entry number 97. Okay, so if it's not a comprehensive law which we want to introduce, like GST is a comprehensive law, a change in the total tax structure. Okay, so for that the constitution has to be amended. But if every year small changes are happening, which is not per se a law in itself, like in 2007, the introduction of CTT and STT was done, that is commodity transaction tax and security transaction tax, right? Sorry, it was done in 2004, and 2007 they have done education cess and secondary and higher education cess introduction. So these things will be done through the Finance Act itself. That is, I told you, every year the budget will be presented from the finance bill. Once its acceptance is done in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, then Finance Act will be created. Those all things can be done through entry number 97. For that, constitution amendment is not required. Like I give you one example. In India, we had EC plus SHEC, right? Which was 2 plus 1 equal to 3%. This was still last year. So when last year Finance Act 2018 was introduced, that time they have changed it and they have made it health and education cess, and it was made 4%. So this change from 3 to 4% is not a change in the entire tax law, and this is a small amendment in the tax rates, or a small tax has been implemented, like education cess, CTT, STT, Krishi Kalyan cess. All these can be done through entry number 97. That is, they become part of the finance bill, and from there, once the acceptance is given in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, then it will become the Finance Act, okay, and will be implemented for that particular year. Like now we have Finance Act 2019, so it will be applicable for previous year 1920, that is assessment year 2021, which is relevant basically for you. Okay, I hope you are understanding whatever I am saying so far. Okay, so similarly, once right now DTC has been kept on hold, but whenever DTC has to be implemented by the government, they will have to first amend the constitution, and only then it can be done. Okay, only then it can be implemented at industry level. Okay, so the next thing is the tax laws, as I told you, can be of two types. One is the revenue matter, and one is the non-revenue matter. Okay, revenue matters are those matters which directly relate to tax revenue for the government, and non-revenue matters are those matters where the focus is mainly on the compliances and regulations at industry level, and the main primary focus is not collection of taxes. When we have revenue matters, the matter has to first go to the Lok Sabha, that is lower house of parliament, and then it will go to the Rajya Sabha. Okay, first the matters will go to the Lok Sabha and then Rajya Sabha. So whatever Finance Act we study every year, because Finance Act relates to Income Tax Act, and Income Tax Act is a revenue matter because it directly results in collection of taxes by the government. So this will first pass through the Lok Sabha, and then it will go to the Rajya Sabha. At Lok Sabha level itself, if it is rejected, then such amendments will not be made applicable. Non-revenue matters, like I told you, Companies Act or Sales of Goods Act or payment of bonus or gratuity or economic and labor laws, all these will first go to the Rajya Sabha, and then it will be going to the Lok Sabha. Okay, so this is the structure we follow in India. Now you might wonder why, what is the logic or rationale behind doing this? So the logic for doing this is that Lok Sabha, we have members of parliament, and these members of parliament are elected by 130 crore people in India. So basically the members of parliament who are sitting in the Lok Sabha, there are close to 543 seats, if I remember it correctly, 543 seats, with highest number of seats being in UP for the Lok Sabha. So these people are elected, these members of parliament are elected by the public. So they are more likely the representatives of the public. So when any matter will come to members of parliament, it is presumed that MPs are representing the interest of public as a whole, and they will only give acceptance to things which are favorable or which are beneficial for public at large. At least this is the understanding we have. Then the members of Lok Sabha will elect the members of Rajya Sabha. That is, election is done, the voting is done among the members of Lok Sabha to elect members of Rajya Sabha. Now, if there is a non-revenue matter, it directly does not impact us. Yeah, if you have a company, if you have a firm, then it might affect you. All those regulations applicable to the company or to the firm or to the HUF. But it does not impact you as far as taxability or tax payments are concerned. So any non-revenue matters first goes through the Rajya Sabha, and then it will come to the Lok Sabha. I hope you have understood this. Okay. Another important thing is that India is a federal state. Federal state means in India we have two types of government. One is the central government and one is the state government. With a country like India, with a dimension being so humongous, it's not possible to run the country through one government. Yes, center we have one government, but to have better control of situation, there is state government. Every state has its own government. The central government is also known as the union government, okay? Central government or union government, and then at every state level there is a state government also. Okay, so that's why India is called as a federal state. So state level, it is the decision of the state to implement the taxes. Okay, like state level, you can have entertainment tax. Okay, but when you're talking about the nation as a whole, then income tax or GST for that matter, these are the powers of the central government. Through the constitution, they get these powers. State level, they can make taxes applicable in their own state. Okay, like implementation of octroi charges, okay, for maybe for a particular state. Now, as per Income Tax Act, agricultural income is non-taxable. But if a particular state wants to make agricultural income taxable, those powers lie with them. Okay, based on this, the constitution, okay, the constitution also has three different lists. One is the union list, okay, which is powers of the central government are covered in this. One is the state list, which obviously, you know, powers of the state government are covered in this. And one is the concurrent list, which will mainly cover non-tax issues like talking about the education board or the municipality corporation. Those are covered in concurrent list, which does not relate to the tax matters or any other compliances relating to corporates and all. Those are covered in the concurrent list. Okay. So if we are talking about income tax, because these are the powers of central government, so it has to pass through the union list. If you're talking about the entertainment tax, we're talking about any other state level tax like sales tax and all, then it will become a matter of state list, because state government has those powers. Okay, and any other thing like municipal corporation or education related topics, those will be covered under the concurrent list. Okay, so I think I have given you the basic understanding about it. Now, if you come to this book. Okay, so before I start with the discussion, I'll just give you small understanding first. The thing is like this. You will be given 2 volumes, volume 1, volume 2. Okay, the chapters are covered in these 2 volumes. Over and above this, I'll also give you a book on the multiple choice questions. Okay, apart from that, so understand how we are going to study first of all. So basically, as much as possible, I have tried covering the Bare Act language in my book. Okay, so we start with the Bare Act language. As a chartered accountant, I feel it's very important that you are well acquainted with the language of the Bare Act. That's very, very important, okay? Because tomorrow we don't want to face a situation where we don't even know how Bare Act is drafted or how to interpret the language of it. So wherever required, I have taken the language of Bare Act. Then we have a breakdown of the law and the provisions, okay? And then we have lots of illustrations or sums, numerical sums, to further understand how the laws, text laws and provisions are to be applied in real life. By taking some examples, we will try to understand that. Okay, this is how we will break down every topic. The chapters which are important marks wise and as well as the volume wise, the chapters which are important are PGBP, then we have CG, capital gains, and then we have assessment procedures. Obviously, apart from that, the non-residents or the international taxation, this will account for close to 30 marks of your curriculum. Okay, so already what I have done is I'll make things very clear to you. I feel apart from understanding of the subject, it is very important that we try to do strategic preparation. Today, if you buy any book of direct tax for CA final in the market, it will be close to 2,000 to 2,500 pages. Now, I strongly believe this. Even if you do 2 to 3 rounds of revision of direct tax, a lot depends on what you are able to revise on the penultimate day. That is the day before your exam. Okay, and direct tax being the 7th paper, if you're writing both the groups, then you're almost exhausted by the time you're supposed to write your DT exam. So a lot depends on how you're able to revise on those last couple of days. So I have done all the hard work at my level to make the material as precise, as concise as possible, okay, without compromising on the quality, so that a student has to put in only that much efforts that you're able to complete everything in those 2 days, okay, so that you're able to revise everything. So both the materials taken together, we have it close to 1,100 pages, okay. We have tried covering more than 500 numerical problems, which means there is no compromise on understanding as far as the understanding is concerned. As far as implementation of your knowledge is concerned, all that will be done very, very meticulously and very, very aggressively we will do. We have lots of sums in the to be done in the class itself, and lots of solved illustrations are given for your better understanding. Past exam papers are also solved, okay. So without compromising on the knowledge at any point of time, we have tried to keep the material as to the point as possible, okay. Sharing of knowledge, yes, practical understanding, loopholes, how people exploit the tax laws, everything will be discussed in the class with you. But at the end of the day, it's important that you strategically prepare and score good marks in the exam. That is to be done first, right? So this is how we have planned it. Plus, I got lots of requests from students to give the summary notes. Initially, I did not used to give summary notes at all, because as I told you, something which is given in the book for 2,500 pages, if I've already made it close to 1,100 pages, you should understand that this is already a summary of what you are supposed to study. But still, keeping in mind the paucity of time that you have, for these 3 chapters, which I feel are the most lengthy chapters, and these 3 chapters together will every time account for 40 to 45 marks of your paper, that is PGBP, capital gains and assessment procedure. This will be around 40 marks minimum, I can say. So what I've done is, for these 3 chapters only, I will give you the summary. But the summary notes will be shared with you only after you're done with all your classes, so that you are first studying everything in depth, and then only for revision purpose you will use summary notes. The summary notes are very, very effective. They are very potent. Everything important from exam perspective is covered in the summary notes, so you need not even worry about that. Okay, those summary notes we will share with you. You just have to on the exam day you can just brush up the concepts through those summary notes. But again, the important point to understand here is that summary notes will make sense only if you know the things. First of all, if you directly hit into the summary notes, that will be a blunder. It won't serve your purpose, because you don't even understand the intent of what I am trying to speak. Okay, so first we have to do everything in depth, revise that thing again, and then after that you are capable of understanding things by just reading the summary of it. Okay, but those summary notes will be useful to give you good coverage of these 3 chapters. For other chapters, I don't feel it will be justified to prepare summary notes, because the chapters itself are not very voluminous. Okay. Okay. I hope you are getting my message loud and clear on whatever we have discussed so far. Okay. We'll come to the first chapter, that is the introduction. Okay. And I've already discussed a lot of things, and a lot of things are still left to be discussed in the structure of law in India. So, as I told you, Article 265 of the Constitution has made it very clear that no law can be made to impose duties and taxes unless the Constitution has given the power. Which means whenever a major tax law has to be implemented, first the Constitution needs to be amended, and only then such tax law can be implemented. Okay, and as I told you, there are 3 different parts of this Constitution. One is the union list, one is the state list, and one is the concurrent list. As I told you, the basic there are 2 types of matters. One is the revenue matter and the non-revenue matter. The basic difference between revenue and non-revenue items is that revenue matter is placed in Lok Sabha and then the Rajya Sabha. In respect of non-revenue matters, it is first placed in Rajya Sabha and then it goes to the Lok Sabha, for which I have already given you the logical understanding. Entry number 1 to 96 are specific entries, and entry number 97 is a residual entry to impose taxes and duties on those matters which are not enumerated in above 96 entries. The Right to Make Income Tax Act was through entry number 82, which states that income tax can be imposed by central government. I told you it is the power of central government to impose the income tax on any income except the agricultural income. The above entries 1 to 97 includes both revenue and non-revenue matters. I told you entry number 1 to 81 relates primarily to non-revenue matters, and entry number 82 onwards up till 96 are revenue matters. As far as the income tax is considered, it is a revenue matter, and it should first be laid down in the lower house of parliament, which is Lok Sabha, and then it will go through the upper house of parliament, that is Rajya Sabha. State list, as I told you, it is the it relates to matters of the state government. Okay, and the state list does not have any residuary entry. Any taxes or duties which has to be imposed must be imposed through entry number 97 given in the union list. For example, if STT or CTT or health and education cess are to be introduced, they are done through the Finance Act, that is the finance bill, which is presented every year in the budget. Like the EC and SHEC was introduced through Finance Act 2007. H and EC, that is Health and Education Cess, was introduced through Finance Act 2018. Similarly, in 2004, CTT and STT were introduced. They will come through the union list residual entry, that is entry number 97. Okay. If you see this for May and November 20 exams, these classes are specifically recorded for May and November 20 exams. For you, Finance Act 2019 will be applicable. What is unique about Finance Act 2019? 2019 has been a year of center elections. Accordingly, we have 2 different budgets being presented. The interim budget was presented on 1st of February and on 5th of July. The second budget was done, which was after BJP has won the elections. Okay. Previous year for you will be 1/4/19 to 31/3/2020, and assessment year is 2021. What does that mean? 1/4/2020 to 31/3/2021. Okay. I hope you're clear till this part of discussion. How the formation of Finance Act is done? Budget is generally presented in February every year. I have not mentioned any date because date is not fixed. Earlier it was the last working day of February, but for the last couple of years they're doing it on the 1st of February. In the election year, the budget is presented twice, once in February and next after the formation of the new government. Okay, so this year it was presented on February 1, 2019. Some amendments were made and they were made applicable with effect from assessment year 2020-21, right? You can see that assessment year is 2020-21. And then the second budget was presented on 5th of July after BJP has won the elections. And then finance bill includes the amendments in income tax. Normally amendments will be for the like if it's Finance Act 2019, it will be applicable for previous year 1920, that is assessment year 2021. Some retrospective amendments can also be made. That can also be there. Retrospective amendments can also be made. But primarily we will have the amendments applicable from that particular previous year. Okay. So finance bill will be presented in the budget, then it has to pass to the Lok Sabha, then Rajya Sabha, revenue matter, and then it will receive the assent of the president and it becomes the Finance Act. Okay. Once the matter passes through the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, it will get assent from the president. Okay. So central government has the power to make the finance bill and make it a finance act. The government has the powers through the union list. Then there will be, you know this, right? We have studied a lot of, apart from the act, we also study rules. So the power to make rules is given in section 295. The rules made by central government will follow the act. Rules can never supersede the act. Okay, rules can only be in accordance with the act. Okay, these will follow the act and therefore rules can never override the act. If there is a contradiction between rules and the act, then act has to follow, act has to prevail, not the rules. Rules cannot supersede the act. And the power to make rules are given in section 295. Okay. Now, the Income Tax Act, which we study, which was introduced first time in 1961, that Income Tax Act 1961, the first time when it was implemented, it was applicable for the previous year 61-62, and the assessment year was 62-63. Okay. Now, the Income Tax Act has 23 chapters. Okay. Then below that we have sections. There are around 298 sections in the Income Tax Act. So you can understand how vast the Income Tax Act is, why the volume that you're studying. Below the sections, we will then have subsections, then we will have clauses, then we will have sub-clauses. You get my point what I'm saying? Chapters, then we have sections. Sections are up to 298. Then we have subsections, then we have clauses, then we have sub-clauses. Okay? So Income Tax Act. For any act, the first section, that is section 1, what is section 1 about? Section 1 will tell you the short title, extent, the commencement date, and the extent of applicability. Okay, that is the first section always. So for the Income Tax Act, the short title itself is the Income Tax Act 1961. Okay, before 1961 Income Tax Act, we had the Indian Income Tax Act. That was in the year 1922. Okay, and after India became independent, then more than 40 years, the Indian Income Tax Act 1922 was applicable, close to 40 years. And then we decided, okay, now we want to introduce our own, we want to make changes to the tax laws. We are not going to follow what Britishers have created. Okay, so the first is the short title, that is Income Tax Act. Then is the extent and applicability and commencement. Like I told you, Income Tax Act 1961 was applicable for previous year 61-62, and assessment year is 62-63. That is applicability. That is the date of commencement. And applicability, like you know, this act will apply to the whole of India, including or excluding the state of Jammu and Kashmir, right? So why Jammu and Kashmir gets that special treatment, why Jammu and Kashmir has to be spoken about separately, I hope you will be aware about this, because Article 370 has given that special status to the state of Jammu and Kashmir, where the state of Jammu and Kashmir, first, they have to give an assent that whether they want a particular act to apply to them or not. And those powers were given through Article 370, which now has been abolished by the current government, which was again another bold step taken. And no more Article 370, no more special treatment for the state of Jammu and Kashmir. What applies to India will also apply to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. A lot of protest was done against it, but at the end of the day, it has been abolished by the current government. Okay, so as per Section 1, the Income Tax Act applies to the whole of India, including the state of Jammu and Kashmir. That is, state of Jammu and Kashmir, the residents in Jammu and Kashmir will also be subject to the Income Tax Act 1961. Applicability, it applies to the whole of India. Okay, so has the India been defined? The answer is yes, India has been defined. First, it was defined in I think Article 1 of the Constitution. After that, Section 2, subsection 25A has given the definition of India. So when they defined India, they made sure that they define India from all the angles. That is, they defined it from landmass perspective, they defined it from the territorial waters, and they also defined it aerially, that is in the air also. So India covers the whole landmass of India, and even the aerial surface, I mean the aerial coverage is also there on this national boundary of India. And then the water is also covered. So I hope you know this, 12 nautical miles. Up till 12 nautical miles across, apart from the land mass, up till 12 nautical miles, even if a transaction is done within those 12 nautical miles, it is assumed that the transaction has been done within India, okay, within the national boundaries of India. So India includes land mass and the air space above it. That is aerially also it is covered. Further, it includes the territorial waters of India up to 12 nautical miles. NM stands for nautical miles. Okay. It also extends to the exclusive economic zone. Now, this beyond 12 nautical miles, it becomes the international waters. Okay. It becomes the international waters. Okay. Now, this international waters, the powers are with the United Nations to decide who will have the power to operate in that international waters. India has been given 200 nautical miles to as exclusive economic zone, EEZ we call it. It's all written over here. Exclusive economic zone. India has been allotted 200 nautical miles by United Nations, where Indians have the right to do activities, and it will be assumed that the transaction is done within India. Who can go and do business over there in that exclusive economic zone? Those powers are given by central government. Central government will give the powers to particular companies or authorities to do transactions or to do any kind of activity like exploration activities, okay, of minerals or any other activity. Those powers are given by central government. Area has been allotted by the United Nations. So the CG will notify the activities that can be conducted in this exclusive economic zone, and India covers the landmass, that is the national boundaries, any aerial transactions, okay, that will also be covered, and 12 nautical miles is the water boundaries, which will be considered as part of India. So even if you do transaction in this area, it will be still a taxable event in India. And then exclusive economic zone, India has been allotted 200 nautical miles. Okay. So Section 1 explains the short title, commencement, date of commencement, and extent of applicability. Section 2, if you know, Section 2 in the Income Tax Act has given you definitions. So Section 2 will give you all the definitions, and these definitions are given in the alphabetical order. Okay, these definitions are given in the alphabetical order, starting with the advanced tax. Like that, they have given the definition of advanced tax is given in Section 2, subsection 1, I think. And then going up till Section 2, subsection 48, the last definition is of the zero coupon bond. That is the ZCB, zero coupon bond. So it goes in the alphabetical order. So if you need any definition, you have to go to Section 2 of the Income Tax Act to find out the definition. Everything, who is an SSE, what is a previous year, what is an assessment year, what is income, everything has been defined over there. Okay. Now, so I hope this session has been useful for you. I think I've shared more or less whatever I wanted to share in this introductory video, and this would have given you a good enough idea about how we are going to keep our discussion very, very in-depth and practical. I don't believe in theoretical studies. I don't believe in studying things from hypothetical angle. Whatever we study, we need to know how it is implemented in real life. And the best part about these two subjects, that is SFM and DirectX, the two subjects which I teach, are that there is no scope for studying anything in a hypothetical world, because these two subjects have the most usage and application in real life. So I am very hopeful that the sessions will turn out to be very useful for you. Okay, and just last thing which I want to point out here is on July 5th. Okay, let's just try to understand a little bit of its application on equity markets. On July 5th, when the second time the budget was presented after the BJP has won the election, certain adverse statements were made over that at that point of time, and they also plan to introduce the super rich tax, okay, which FIIs will have to bear. And this, once this was announced, after that there was a lot of negative sentiment in the market, and you won't believe me on this, but close to 12 lakh crores of market capitalization from equity market was lost in India. Equity markets started going. So when BJP won the election, it was taken in a positive spirit that, okay, BJP coming in, new reforms will be introduced which will be beneficial for the for nationwide. But some statements made by Nirmala Sitharaman presented the budget, as Arun Jaitley has stepped down because of not having good health, so he had to step down, and Nirmala Sitharaman presented the budget, and they planned to introduce a super rich tax. Plus, we did not see any good like reforms in the tax laws. No benefits were given to the residents in India, as a result of which a negative sentiment was created, and close to 12 lakh crores of market capitalization was lost from July till September. Okay, so market capitalization is number of shares into current market price. So there was a lot of selling pressure in the market during these 2.5 months. Everybody was finding that Indian environment is very hostile for doing business. Last year, LTCG, long-term capital gain exemption, was removed. That is 1038 was removed. Section 112A was introduced in place of it. Moreover, there are no tax benefits given whatsoever. Plus, this year, we will study in the next class. This year, a surcharge has been increased on the individuals. So a lot of negativity was there, and it is like this, that once there are bad tax reforms in the eyes of the Indian residents, or even for FII, DII, it will straight away have an impact on the Indian equity markets. Okay, which also is my subject over there. So I love this interlinkage between two. I don't love markets going down; it impacts my advisory business. But yes, I love the fact that I'm able to link this and teach my students about it. They realize this, and in the last week of September, they have made certain amendments. They have made certain proposals which they are going to implement, like from 2019 till 2023, if a new firm is getting established, they won't have to they don't have to implement the MAT provisions. Plus, companies, the domestic companies which are not going to take any other benefits of the tax laws, for them the tax rates will come down to 22%, and including surcharge and everything, their tax rate will still be close to only 25%. This gave a good boost again to the positive sentiments of the Indian economy, and from there again the market revived. You wouldn't believe me, in 2 days the Sensex, the index Sensex, it went up by 2,000 points in 2 days. In the history of Indian equity markets, I've been following markets for close to now 15 years. I have never seen 2 consecutive days, 2 back-to-back days, when Sensex has gone up by 1,000 odd points each of these 2 days. So this has kept a positive sentiment in the market, and so those benefits are yet to be passed on to the individuals, I mean the Indian residents. But for the time being, it ultimately, what happened in the September last week has created that positive sentiment in the mind of the Indian residents, and even for that matter FII, because even they decided they will withdraw the implementation of super rich tax. That is what they decided. Okay, so I hope this introductory video has been useful for you. Next class, we will start the discussion with what are the tax rates, the slabs, the marginal relief, the surcharge, all these things, and then we will start with the father of all chapters, that is PGBP. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the session. Till we meet again, bye bye. God bless all of you. Thank you.